driving around. Look, it's flooded out there. I can tell you, I almost swam here. You know. So be ready. We have an interesting but it's possible today if I had call levu. In fact, if I can make the noise, that's what I'd have had today. So today we're going to venture a little further than we normally do. Go towards our brethren, South Africa. You were rock one thing. It affected you. Now, so the currency because of Jacob Zuma. Black males moving up and down with all sorts of items in their hands, and you're South African men are lazy. They're just lazy. Oh, please come for dear. What's their problem? I've heard that. I've heard that so many times this week that I'm now that me not to come. I had invite two of, in my opinion, most important. So to invite them onto this show because I think it's time for us nice to and just learn a little bit more what's going on. So my pleasure, I have Eusebius McKaiser. See, I've been practicing my pronunciations. Eusebius, did I get that right? I was trying not to do Niger on it or British for that matter.
That was perfect. You got it right the first time we spoke on the phone. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. And it's my pleasure to invite. If you've ever read her essay, she's probably like wound you up and you're like, who is she? What does she think she is? Yes, her name. And she's joining me all the way from America of the overseas. You're like 8 a.m. where she is. She's in that big university they call Harvard. Yes, the one I'm planning to go to in my next lifetime. Her name is none other than Panashe Chigumadzi. Did I get it right?
Unfortunately, my sister, you didn't. But points
Panashe,
for an effort.
I tried now, and I've been practicing. No, I'm gonna try again. Chigumadzi. Chigumadzi. See, I put an A. Okay, Chigumadzi.
But the spirit was there. I feel you. The Pan-Africanist spirit was there, so we're good.
Thank you so much. And like I said, both of you. Eusebius, I know you're in SA. We have an hour's difference, but notwithstanding, you've given up your time to be here. And you, Panashe, I know you're all the way in the US. So thank you so much. Now, I think I told both of you when I contacted you that I was close to combusting. Now, if I'm close to combusting, I can only imagine how both of you feel. So let's start from the top, right? When we look at what I would call the uprising in South Africa, the civil unrest, which many will call rioting, looting, etc. in South Africa. Educate us a little further about what's going on beyond the images, beyond the videos, beyond the narratives and the rhetorics. Because let's be frank, in Nigeria, we get a lot of our news from Onyibo News. Muzungu news stations. So I want you, both of you, and I'll come to you first, Panashe. I want you to educate us as to what's really going on.
Well, it's such a complex issue, and I think, of course, as your sister Chimamanda Adichie has always taught us that there's the danger of the single story, and there are many different stories that have a particular confluence now combust with this particular issue. But of course, I'm a historian. Aside from sometimes rabble rousing with Nigerians, is to have a long historical view, and I think sometimes our political and historical memory in South Africa is very short, and we might truncate to the Zuma trial, for example, or even see this as only a post-apartheid South African story of ANC government failure. But I think what we need to understand is that South Africa, for the last 3, 4, 5 centuries, is a country that was built on dispossession. It was built on violence. And in particular, if we must think about what South Africa is, the best metaphor I can think of it is a castle built on sand. And this castle, again, built by violence. If you think about the fact that, one of the most, I think for me, illuminating moments in everything was not so much the looting, but when the president addressed the nation, both on Sunday and Monday, and thinking about the fact that this is the same president who oversaw the Marikana massacre in 2012. Now, this moment was a turning point for the post-apartheid experiment, where he called famously for concomitant action against black miners who were striking for a decent living wage, which was at the time 12,500 Rand. Even now, that's less than $1,000, right? From the company whose board he sat on, which is called Lonmin. And what's important about that is that the CEOs of these companies are earning millions, internationally competitive salaries, and the mine workers are asking for 12,500 Rand, less than $1,000. This same company was founded in 1909 as Lonro, right, the London Rhodesia Company, in an era which we now know as the Minerals Revolution in South Africa, the era that really built the wealth that South Africa is known for, in terms of its glittering resources and the diamonds and the gold. And in this era, the kind of dispossession in terms of land dispossession, in terms of just, the farmers or the land that was taken at the time, the ways in which the South African economy is structured and built on cheap black labor was cemented particularly in that era. If you look at the fact that in those mines where you had 40% of the world's gold stores at a time when the global economy was now based on gold, you found that there was more than 1 in 10 death rates of black miners, right? And this was a time with which we built the migrant labor system in South Africa. And if you listen to many of your viewers, I'm sure they listen to Hugh Masekela, there's a song he sings called Stimela, right? And it's about the dispossession of Southern Africa, where black men from across the region were shepherded into, or rather conscripted into these mines as cheap labor, leaving black women who are meant to supposedly subsidize their labor because their labor is always under wage labor. The point of this, it might seem a bit sort of quixotic to make that long historical arc, but to say that there are kinds of historical continuities that have not been addressed by our post-apartheid transition, that a former trade unionist can then sit at the top of this, what we call white monopoly capital. This kind of structure has not been addressed by the African National Congress.
Okay.
So when then you see like so-called issues around corruption and that kind of thing, many people would argue that, in fact, it is by design, or rather structurally, where the means of redistribution amongst the black population are often through patronage networks. And that's what you then see with someone like a Jacob Zuma and the ANC at large.
Okay.
And very often in South Africa, what we do is we then personify the problems in one particular figure. I'm also from Zimbabwe. We'll think if Mugabe goes, our problems will be solved. If Zuma goes, our problems will be solved. If Ramaphosa goes, our problems will be solved. But there's a broader economic system that needs to be dismantled, and that wasn't dismantled by the negotiated settlement of 1994.
Thank you. Eusebius, I know you're not too far away from that. But even more interesting is, I know that you were totally unimpressed when Ramaphosa gave his 2 speeches. I'm not even going to try to quote you, but you were literally like, you were damning. He would almost like saying he really shouldn't have bothered. What would you say is going on?
I think there are immediate causes and there are long-term causes, and they combine. If you had to interview, which our reporters have done well to do, 5 or 10 different looters, in inverted quotes, you can find between 5 and 10 different motives. So there isn't any one single justification or motive behind why what's happening is playing out. The immediate causes are political, in the sense that the trigger over the last 2 weeks is obviously Jacob Zuma being found guilty of contempt of court and being sentenced 15 months unsuspended to jail, and that being confirmed by a high court that refused to stay the execution of that order. I think what you will find is that there's some Jacob Zuma supporters that are unhappy. You will find some organized criminality, politically motivated, targeting substations, for example, reservoirs, also warehouses, in an attempt to disrupt the value chain of key sectors of the economy. That isn't spontaneity, that speaks to planned political organized criminality. But then you will also find thousands of people that are simply expressing deep discontent for being invisible in South African society, living on the margins under conditions of extreme poverty. We have a Gini coefficient that describes inequality. We should really be speaking about wealth, income, asset inequality, and other kinds of inequality. We're one of the most economically unjust nations on earth. We've got unemployment levels of 74%, among South Africans under the age of 25. Half of South Africa is living under conditions of chronic poverty. So those factors together give you a Molotov cocktail, and that's what explains what has happened in South Africa.
Okay.
The president is not very good in terms of his leadership, both in two regards, and I'll stop after that so we can chat dynamically. At the level of affect, showing emotion and empathy from a political speech and communications point of view, he doesn't sound and look like someone who's in charge, who is feeling with the masses. Everyone from your taxpayers who are unhappy to people living under conditions of poverty. He looks and sounds defeated, like someone who's very scared of the challenge that history has bequeathed him. And then on the substantive issues, he's also not showing leadership from a thought leadership point of view in helping us to think through where to from here. So there's a massive dearth of political leadership in South Africa. And in the meantime, the material conditions are so deeply unjust that what is playing out is not, to come back to your opening description of some of your own listeners. It is not a bunch of South African men who are lazy to work. It's a bunch of South African citizens who are hungry and do not have opportunity to realize their potential.
Thank you. Now, what I hear from both of you is actually one could marry it together, where Panashe has given us the historic background. You, Eusebius, come from where we are right now. And if you merge both of them together, I see structure. I see structure from Panashe's point of view, where she's saying, look, so we have all these structures and we had this union leaders, etc., etc. And then we have the majority who are being forced to sit within this structure. Eusebius, you say, hang on a minute, why is ANC not thinking about this economic imbalance that's going on, right? Panashe, tell me something. How do we... When you talk about those structures, and those structures were inherited by the ANC, do we break them down? Do we rebuild them? How do we get the majority, the masses, to be able to benefit from those structures you're talking about?
Well, again, why I think it's important that, sometimes people speak about the fact that the ANC sold out in 1994 and that kind of thing is quite common from people my generation who might say something like Mandela sold out. We're part of a generation very much pushes against the sort of compromises of the negotiated settlement in 1994, where, there was political power given to Black people, whereas there was not the fundamental economic redistribution or the restructuring. However, I think that view is very historical because there has been a critique of the ANC's understanding what liberation would be from the very beginning of its inception. Again, this is why I speak about, and I went all the way back to the early 1900s to speak about what was the conception of freedom by the ANC back then. Times we've had sort of critiques by what we call the Africanist school. You have the Pan-Africanist Congress, which has critiqued what, the ANC's non-racial vision of a South Africa. It has critiqued, important documents and vision statements by the ANC, such as the Freedom Charter, so that it is not entirely new to then hear, or unprecedented to hear a particular generation saying that this country is not working. And I'm saying that it is beyond just an issue of corruption and this particular ANC dispensation. I'm saying it's an issue also with the entire political imagination. Because what you're saying is that when, for example, the ANC was formed in 1912, and sometimes they've been denigrated by other African movements for saying they're a glorified civil rights movement, and we can talk about that later, but the idea being that, are you saying you want a fundamental dismantling of what was then the Union of South Africa? Or are you saying we want the enfranchisement of Black people within a settler state? We have not had the complete abolition of South Africa in its complete ideology and understanding of what
I need you to say that again very slowly so they can take it in at the back. Just repeat that statement. We have not had, start from, like really slowly. I need my people to swallow that.
We've not had a fundamental re-envisioning of what South Africa is at its core. If we're thinking of South Africa having inherited its structures from the Union of South Africa and then later the Republic of South Africa, all of that needs to be fundamentally undone. And we've had various traditions in South Africa, political traditions, we have critiqued that ANC, what we might call the Congress traditions, vision of what liberation in South Africa might be. And for people like me, it might sound kind of frustrating, but we're always going to bring these things to the long historical view and say, well, at the broader structural and sometimes it might feel abstract level, what do we actually think South Africa should be? Some of us think that there shouldn't be a South Africa. There should be an Azania, for example. And very often, again, I say this because South Africa was created by the gun, was created by violence. I think we would be very naive to think that we are going to undo this violence in a way that is going to be, and it's not because we want it to be that way, but it is really just a realistic understanding of history. If a country is built by violence and dispossession, it's going to be very difficult to dismantle it through the kinds of historically sanctioned means that might be, allowed by the likes of the World Bank, the IMF, or, very often in South Africa, every time there's talk of redistribution, they'll say that you're going to sabotage the rand.
Okay, we're about to go on break, but Eusebius, I want you to think about this. And when we come back from break, I'm going to need you to answer this. So Panashe talked about that generation that says, quote, this South Africa isn't working for me. Is that not the generation that falls into that 70% you were talking about? You said are unemployed, etc. And the generation that you feel is being let down, not just by ANC, but if we bring it to home, by Ramaphosa, right? Now, we're going to go on a quick break and we'll be right back. Stay listening, people. You're going to learn. And I mean, learn from this today.
Downfall Conversations will be right back. Join the conversation no matter where you are. Download our mobile app by searching Nigeria Info FM on the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. Also, get news updates in sports, entertainment, news, and current affairs right on the app. 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.
More news and information coming up. We'll be back in a moment.
Indulge and get lost in the deeply satisfying taste of the Chi Exotic range of delicious fruit blends.
Chi Exotic Nectar. I love the taste. Now available in can.
We're back.
We're back.
We
are back.
We're back on 99.3 Nigeria Info. Welcome back to Downfall Conversations, right here on 99.3 Nigeria Info.
And we're back. Right, look, let me read out the numbers again because I can see I'm getting messages saying we got questions. Right. Here's the general number, 07000. No, sorry. Start again. 0700993 993 993. And the female only line, don't you dare try to sneak in there if you're a bloke. I'm not going to answer your call. 014 657 190. And you can also send us a WhatsApp on 0809 597 5805. If you're looking on YouTube and you see me sinking, it's my chair. It's just going down and down and down. I don't know what's up with it, but we're going to continue this. Right. So before we went on break, Eusebius, I asked for you to come after break that generation that Panashe said, quote, this country, this South Africa isn't working for us. That generation that you say are 70% unemployed. That generation that's being affected by the South Africa that we see today and the crisis and the ones that are taking part in the crisis that's unfolding in front of us. Talk to me about that generation and how do we actually, how would you say, what would you say to Ramaphosa to actually engage that generation right now? What should he be doing or the government of South Africa be doing that they're not doing?
It's such an important, urgent question. The first of many problems, and I'll restrict myself to just a couple of them for discussion's sake, is that intergenerational conversation has broken down in South Africa. It's not unique to South Africa, but it is a problem when the youth bulge in South Africa is particularly affected by the poor state of the state. Young people are disproportionately affected by the state of the economy. And in that context, when you have leaders that condescend to the young, instead of actually listening, allowing young people to be co-creators of solutions, they know what their needs are. They are more dexterous when it comes to social media, technology, slotting into the modern economy, and their agencies are not being respected, being listened to, and being unleashed. So just at that level alone, we've got a leadership problem. We've got lots of old people in South African government, seconded to the state and within parliament. And young people are literally seen as subjects of government policy rather than as persons that have got brains, that have got viewpoints, and that have energies that can be leveraged. So that's the first problem. The second problem is the basics. I mean, we can talk about history, we can talk about liberation movements typically struggling to convert themselves 20, 30 years after political freedom into excellent bureaucracies. But ultimately, it's really not rocket science. Where young people are being let down are in relation to quality basic education, access to affordable quality post-secondary school education, opportunities for training, and then opportunities for apprenticeship, mentoring, and entry into the job market. That is what Ramaphosa should be thinking about and what the economic cluster should be delivering.
Right. I've just heard you say education, training, mentoring, and we could go on. When you say that, what I hear is Nigeria. I'm hearing Nigeria. This is Nigeria. This is what affects me as well. So tell me, Panashe, why then do you think Nigerians, my people, dare to say South African black men are lazy? That's even when they bother to say black men. Why?
Well, again, I'll be frustrating and go back to history again, because even with the question of education, because that's one of the places where many of us I'm also Zimbabwean, will look down on South Africans and say, well, these people are so uneducated, they don't want to work, they haven't have skills and that kind of thing. But again, structurally, you also want to think about things like Bantu education, which quite literally was designed to ensure that we have hewers of wood and drawers of water. That was what the system was designed for. Unfortunately, then the ANC there has not been able to convert that system and dismantle that system of Bantu education and its legacies. And I'm then part of that generation, which has been called for, the roads must fall, fees must fall generation, where we're clearly seeing that there's a problem with education in the country. We call for free, quality, decolonized education. The cost of it is too high. And beyond just thinking about sort of the universities, as Eusebius was saying, it's also about basic training. Vocational training, all of those kinds of things. But you're seeing that there's a fundamental mismatch with our economy where most of us, particularly as Black people, young Black people, are being rendered surplus to the economy. That's why you have a situation where we have 75% of young Black people who are unemployed. So there is no stake in this South Africa that people are talking about. That's why there's a poem by a young poet called Vilakazi, I'm forgetting his name, but Magafula Vilakazi, and he says, I don't want South Africa anymore, right? Because people are seeing that right now. when I do have this qualification, for example, I'm going to struggle to get the opportunity to get that internship, to get that training. So much of what people were promised in this new South Africa, particularly us, the young people, the ones who were put on those election posters saying, you know, a better life for all, we were the born frees. Right. And that's why there's a particular tenor and urgency with the kind of critique you're hearing from my generation, because there were many promises around what a new South Africa would mean. If you work hard, if you get an education, you should have a better life for all. But this is not materialized for the vast majority of people. And even those who are within the universities are, of course, a very privileged group of people. Right now, as you can see with the COVID era, you can imagine the number of people who've dropped out and completely being left behind. Within the COVID area, within the system of education. So there are many of these kinds of issues that we have within South Africa. We can talk about the teachers' unions. We can talk about, you know, a whole range of things. And it's quite baffling sometimes, as Eusebius is saying, sometimes South Africans, well, the government throws so much money at a whole range of, say we're going to be giving more iPads, more laptops to schools. And you say, well, can we just make sure that our teachers understand the curriculum? We changed the curriculum 5 years.
Yes.
And it's as basic that. So there is that level of, yes, down to earth basics, getting those things right. Some things are needless. However, we need to balance that with a longer view, a longer term structural view of what South Africa is and how do we dismantle that completely and be brave enough to do that.
Thank you. Eusebius, you see, the youth bulge that you mentioned is an Africa-wide, you know, is a continental-wide fact and an issue. What are the lessons, first of all, that Nigeria needs to learn from this, and then Africa-wide?
Yeah, thanks, Ireti. Firstly, I want to agree with what Panashe said.
Go ahead.
That kind of structural analysis of education as a value chain is really, really important. And at each part of that value chain, in fact, going all the way back even to what happens before you start basic education. South Africa, in the first 1,000 days of a child's life, we've already got a problem where inequality sets in there already. Many are left behind before they've even learned how to walk, and that has got developmental educational consequences later on. But I want to answer you slightly indirectly by maybe also provoking your callers to call in. And
they will be calling in, trust me. Go on.
If there are South Africans who are listening, they may be more provoked than Nigerians. I want to say two things. I mean, firstly, and I don't know if Panashe will agree with me on this, it's one of those controversial issues about psychology. When you look at South Africans as Nigerians, and I know I'm generalizing, right? And obviously there are always exceptions. One of the consequences of the history Panashe is talking about is that when it comes to Southern Africa, and South Africa in particular, our distance from colonial empire is more recent than yours. And one of the consequences of that is that, quite apart from needing a better government, ANC or not ANC, a better state, is that we also need to deal with a psychology that diminishes our self-belief as South Africans, and Black South Africans in particular. One of the things that I love about Nigerians across your class strata, and I first encountered this as a student in England, when I encountered fellow Africans from the rest of the continent that are part of the diaspora, is a sense of can-doism and self-belief that I wish many more South Africans have. Even my Zimbabwean friends, I think, have got a deeper level, at the general level, sense of self-worth, self-actualization, your entitlement to be in the world than many South Africans. So that's something we need to learn from you. What you can learn from us in turn, however, is to be humble about the consequences of inequality. Nigerians should not scoff at what is playing out in South Africa, because you yourself have got the conditions that are conducive to similar kinds of unrest. And you might go, nah, they think they're the best blacks on the continent. But tomorrow, you will be a guest on my radio show explaining unrest in Nigeria to South Africans.
Please say that slowly, Eusebius. They need to hear that. Say it slowly. Absolutely. And repeat it, please.
If Nigeria does not deal itself with deep inequality and with deprivation, then tomorrow this exact same conversation will take place, but Nigeria and South Africa will be swapped in the framing of the conversation. Wherever you have deprivation and inequity and injustice, including in the states where Panashe is studying, you will have potential social unrest around the corner if you don't deal with it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now, Panashe, tell me. David mentioned something, and I know we Nigerians, honestly, our arrogance is, oh gosh, if we could box our arrogance, we would literally be the richest country in the world. The lines are going off. Let me remind you of the telephone lines. The number is 0700 993 993 993. Female only line is 014 657 190, and the WhatsApp number is 0809 597 5805. Now, even if you're wherever you're listening to, try and call through. Honestly, I'm going to try and pick up as many calls and as many questions. This is done for conversation. We're not afraid. As long as you don't swear, we're not afraid. Okay. Now, so Panashe, I'm going to come to you about that humility that we Nigerians lack, especially when we're looking at our other, African brethrens and sisterins. Could that be what triggered that essay of yours? That essay where you declared you were no longer talking to Nigerians about race. Could it be?
I mean, of course, that, as I explained in the article, that was said in jest because, even the title was a play on a, very famous book on race by a Nigerian British writer, Reni Eddo-Lodge. So, of course, they're Nigerians who engage race in ways that are incredibly generative. But the point was really, particularly, and the subtitle of this essay was on writers' solidarity and empathy, right? And it was around sort of a number of important, or at least canonical, writings by some Nigerians that have sometimes failed to engage the historicity of the problem of race, and sort of looked at Southern Africans and South Africans in particular through an ahistorical lens. And as you're saying in this particular case, seeing that, well, these people are just lazy, these Black people don't know what they're doing, those kinds of things. And to almost look at it as if we've brought it amongst or, upon ourselves. Of course, there are important critiques. As I say here, most of my critique here has been around the ANC and its conception of freedom and holding them accountable to what they have envisioned for us as Black people. However, it was then to say to Nigerians that just because you do not have the same experience, do not dismiss our experience. I looked at, books like, Capitalist N-Word, which was quite a big book in South Africa. We had people like Chigumadzi Obioma, who had written in very ahistorical ways about failing Black nations without kind of having that sense of the historical and structural basis of anti-Blackness within the world. So it's to say that let us actually combine this self-confidence. I, as a Southern African, love, to see Black people who have, been brought up with a different kind of self-image. Not that that anti-Blackness does not exist in Nigeria. It does, as many of you would know, and you can have discussions. You can look at NSAS and a whole range of things, Boko Haram, all of those kinds of issues are happening within Nigeria. But I think even just broadly with, I would say, African studies and a whole range of disciplines, we often look at colonialism as a non-racial enterprise. It wasn't. It was a decidedly racial project. And I think that was what I was mostly interested in, is how do we have a historical lens and combine the confidence and self-confidence, I don't want to call it arrogance, the self-confidence of the Africans who've grown up outside of the settler colonies. Because I think what the settler colonies do give us, though, is a way of sharpening our analysis, because it is no longer structurally obfuscated that, for example, all of our accounts are held in France, for example, as the Francophone African countries do have, right? We can see the coloniality happening with the physical bodies of those who have been settlers. And it was to say, how do we combine these different historical experiences to have a sharp analysis of what is afflicting us as Black people globally, not just on the continent?
Thank you. Basically, what you're saying is, Nigerians, get off your high horse, listen. We are all effectively in the same problem. We need to look at this and apply more empathy to each other, right? That's really what you're saying.
I would also add that it's one of the things I did try and emphasize in the piece is that we've had historical movements around solidarity, but I think
Correct.
what has happened, the post-nationalist phase, the post-independence phase across the world, is we've had that nationalist turn where all of us have lost interest in the global Pan-Africanist project. We're invested in our, individual nationalist projects and not interested in what is the good and the welfare of other Black people beyond just those in my country.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, I'm going to go to the lines. Are you guys ready? We're ready to open up the lines? Right. So, as a Nigerian, before I open up the lines, I'm going to ask you this. If you've been listening to this show from the beginning, you've heard Eusebius, you've heard Panashe. What is that single fear that's triggered in your head? Okay? Let's go to the first line. Hello? Hello? Let's go to the next one. Hello? Okay. It's a rainy day. Hello?
Yeah, hello, good morning.
Good afternoon. What's your name and where are you calling from, please?
My name is Stanley, and I'm calling you from Ibutemeta in Lagos.
Okay, Stanley, go ahead. What do you have to add?
Yeah, quite informative, your program today, and your guests have been so wonderful in terms of their knowledge base and how eloquent they've been in addressing some of these issues. But I think one of the major things I could relate with in this is that South Africa, just like the rest of Africa, is suffering from structural problems. Our foundations were created by people who had no interest in us, but had interest in their own affairs. And then if we continue to live or continue to carry out our lives based on these structures that these persons have created, then we'll eternally continue to have issues like this. There is no part of Africa you're going to figure out right now that doesn't have one issue or the other about race, about structure, about government, about economy, and like in terms of economic equality and the rest of them.
Thank
so this
you.
is what I would suggest. It takes very strong leadership. It takes a very bold leadership, which we are actually lacking. I agree with Eusebius about Ramaphosa. Take very strong leadership.
Oh, we've lost him. I don't know whether you both heard him, but what he was saying was that, well, he ended it by saying we need strong and bold leadership. He says the structures that's in Africa, in the continent, across the continent, it's actually not working for anyone in the continent. That's what he was saying. Let's go to the next line. Can you guys hear us now? We're going to try and make sure you hear the callers as well. Hello? Hello? Okay. The line's cut off. Right. Let me just read out the numbers again. 07 00 993 993 993. Female only line is 014 657 190. And the WhatsApp number, if you want to send a WhatsApp, because the lines might be a bit dodgy because of the rain, 0809 597 5805. We have calls going. Hello? Hello?
Hi, I can hear you.
Okay, we can hear you. Good afternoon. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Oh, the name is Kende.
Kende. Right, let me just make sure my guests can hear you. Stay on the line, Kende. Can you both hear him? Right, let me have a thumbs up. Panashe, can you hear him? Can you hear Kende? Yes. Okay, Kende, go ahead with your comment or question, please.
Okay. I'm pretty surprised that some Nigerians are feeling South African men are lazy based on what's going on presently in South Africa. Nigeria recently had the same experience during the COVID situation, where we had breakdown of law and order, when Nigerians went AWOL searching for food all over the place. Would you say Nigerians are lazy at that point in time? The answer would be no. What I'm hearing from your guest there is simply trying to let me know that Africa generally has a problem, and the problem has to do with leadership.
Yeah.
We have a case where the wrong set of people seems to have harnessed power to themselves. I keep on telling people Nigeria isn't running a democracy. Nigeria isn't running a federal system of government. We are running an oligarchy or something that has to do with you just have a few people having power and leaving the rest out. Basically, that's what's going on. You have a Baba Estale somewhere
please interpret that to them.
A godfather.
Yeah, deciding who becomes what. And it's a major problem. During the NSAS thing, the young lads went out saying our parents didn't do enough to get us out of this mess. But then the government of the day showed the youths of today what the parents went through when they tried to bring out Nigeria, where they were killed, where there were lots of imprisonments going on, and people just took it in and allowed it. I think it's time the people of Africa begin to take elections, leadership seriously. Poverty is a weapon, and our leaders have realized that, and are using poverty as a driving force to ensure they retain power. Can we look beyond the poverty during election period and just vote in the right set of people? That's where I stand in all this. I think Nigerians should learn quickly and know that this could happen to us because we are facing basically the same structural problems where we have a few people controlling power and leaving the rest out in the cold. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Did you hear what he said? Yeah, Eusebius, do you have any comment? Any response to that?
Yeah, to both of the questions and comments, I think they are fundamentally on point. There's almost too much to say there. I mean, there's the quick version and then there's a longer version that will require another episode. The quick version is that we do have a dearth of ethical and technical excellence in political leadership in way too many countries around the continent. South Africa is no exception. I think the only thing worse than the pedestrian leadership of Ramaphosa is to imagine what South Africa would be like if someone else from the ANC's top leadership tier were to become the next president of the country. And that's a scary prospect, because while he is lukewarm at best, some of the other folk in the top structures of the African National Congress are even worse. And quite frankly, some of them are implicated in criminality even. The only thing to be said about the leadership crises around the region, which is little comfort to us as Africans, is that there's a leadership crisis in the world. Whether we're talking about Boris in the UK, whether we're talking about Trump, whether we're talking about even Biden, who every time he speaks, you are scared that your grandfather will have a gaffe on foreign policy, for example. So the world is in crises. The only difference between the global north and the global south is the global north stole so much from us in Africa that they have material bulwark against poor leadership. It will take a while before the masses really feel it. Whereas in South Africa and in your country, we can ill afford poor leadership because the costs are high and immediate.
Yeah. Thank you. Panashe, do you want to come in on that before I take the next call?
One of my, I often, when we talk about African leadership, again, I am also interested in political economy of what are the conditions that allow for the kind of leadership that puts people first in the very first place. We think about the fact that he was barely in office for a couple of months and Lumumba was assassinated in 1961, right? We're looking at as late as 1987, Sankara was assassinated. And we know now that the CIA and that kind of thing was involved. It's to say that when we do have these leaders who are for the people and putting the nation first, who are interested in these kinds of fundamentally redistributive models, that has tended to be undermined. We're looking at last year, for example, the election of Museveni. We know that he is backed by the US. We know people like Kagame, despite all his human rights abuses, is being backed by the West, right? And I think that's not enough of the discourse when we're talking about African leadership, to the extent to which we actually have control over who becomes our leader. Even in Zimbabwe, when you talk about the coup, not a coup, one of our head of the military, who's now a vice president, flew in from China. Yeah. Right. So part of this is also, we need to have that kind of discussion and not be ahistorical or look at African leadership within a vacuum. Right now, we've seen the issue in Haiti. For example, you can look at Grenada, and we're talking about this in the Black world historically, even from Haiti, right? So the idea that we are completely free to choose the leaders that we want is not entirely true.
It's a fallacy.
It's a fallacy. This is
Yeah.
not to say that we abdicate our responsibility. This is not to say that we don't go and vote, but there's something that we need to think differently. Even in Zimbabwe, a lot of young people would talk about voting, but we know that structurally, there's such a thing as structural rigging, even in the United States. It's just that it's structurally obfuscated. But there's a way in which sometimes electoral politics are not going to deliver the kind of fundamental change that we want. In
Thank you.
Nigeria, I'm not an expert, but I think that you're not going to remove a military dictatorship or nominally democratically elected, even in Zimbabwe, through the ballot,
Yeah.
for example. We need to think fundamentally differently about many of these nominally democratically elected dictators who are actually backed by the gun. And that's the situation that many of us across the African continent, in Eswatini, for example, right now, there are
I have to
soldiers who
interrupt
are-
you. I have to interrupt you. So many lines are going off. Let's pick up the next call. Everybody's got something to say. Hello? Hello?
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hello, how are you? What's your name and where are you calling from?
My name is Eda Edia.
Elder, right. You need to drop in your question or your comment quickly before we go to break. Go ahead.
Okay, I will try. I think when the South Africans, what they going through, the generation that went through that are probably still alive. When you compare to what happened during the Civil War, when you talk to our
Go ahead.
fathers, everybody is afraid, because they experienced something, and then the youths are just coming up and they can say, "I damn everything. Let me just do things," And then up north, you see what they are doing. When the people are there, they are just, the slave master thing. And tomorrow, like the other guy said, you want to explain something about why this is happening in Nigeria. Why will you not get people out of poverty? Train them. If they want to go to school, learn a trade, train them so that they get employed. You can't just come and say as a leader that all these people that are going to school, when you come out, there's no job for you. It's unbecoming of a leader.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Are we going? We have to go. We'll be right back. My producer's like, we have to go. I'll be right back. Don't go away.
Downfall Conversations will be right back.
Follow my guy. How every now?
Benjo, what thing now? That is money you just call me.
See, 9 Mobile, they give me call bonus while I not finish. Now all my guys go here.
If you never recharge your 9 Mobile line for 40 days or more, recharge 200 naira and above, and we go summer you 6 times your recharge and double data bonus.
I'll follow my guy.
Benjo, see, I go block you now. You go see him.
Terms and conditions day. 9 Mobile.
Looking for the best place to buy land anywhere in Lagos State? Well, search no more. EUC Homes is the answer. With over 40 estates, we are known to be the best at what we do. Call us now on 0817-194-7272. That is 0817-194-7272 to purchase the very best of lands in Lagos with genuine title documents. Invest with EUC Homes today and enjoy good lands free from all forms of encumbrance and no Omonile drama. For more inquiries, please call 0817-194-7272. That is 0817-194-7272 or visit our office at Suite E124/127 Road 2, Ikota Shopping Complex, VGC Lekki, Lagos. EUC Homes. Now we be the Baba for real estate.
99.3 Nigeria Info, your number one station for talk. Let's talk.
Welcome back to Downfall Conversations, right here on 99.3 Nigeria Info.
Hello. We're back. Right. Eusebius, I need to come to you. Earlier on, Panashe talked about SA being built on violence. Do you think violence is the solution, or is there room for a therapeutic violence in the Fanonian sense, so to speak?
Talking of violence, there's a violent sound that is...
Isn't this? There is a violent sound in your... Right, okay, the technical guy can hear you. I have no idea where that's coming from.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well.
I'll speak anyway, as long as you can hear me.
Thank you.
Panashe is absolutely right about violence, and I'll keep it short because I think she's got her hand up as well. She's right about violence as the foundation of the South African state, and we haven't reconciled with the psycho-political consequences of that. But in the immediate South African situation that we must deal with right now, while simultaneously thinking about the longer psycho-political issues we haven't dealt with, violence is not the answer, because violence will lead to a bunch of consequences that will worsen the very problems that we're trying to solve for. When you resort to violence, you have less investment in the country. You don't have an environment conducive for doing business. You worsen the unemployment situation. And invariably, the poorest of the poor bear the worst brunt, because those South Africans, the few who are wealthy and who have exit options, they can go abroad to Canada, the USA, to Australasia, and seek other opportunities. Their assets are movable. Their skill sets may be required in countries where there's a shortage of certain skills that highly educated South Africans may be able to go and offer. So I don't believe that violence is the answer. I think the answer lies in cross-class solidarity and South Africans strategically cooperating to co-create solutions for poverty and for inequality.
Okay. Now, before you come in, I know you want to make a comment, Panashe. Let me just read this. I have an SMS on WhatsApp. Good day, Cicio and the guests. What's going on in South Africa isn't new to Africans. Every African nation have their own peculiar problems. Truth be told, African leaders don't think outside of the box. African leaders have failed their teaming populace, especially the youths who are supposed to be the future of these countries. We need selfless leaders who are creative and innovative. African political elites are lazy. They're just handouts. They just want handouts from the West. In return, the West will make them do their own biddings. Lastly, until Africans start to see themselves as one, these problems will keep festering. That's from Edozie Din Naiji. We'll be right back after this news. Very quickly, we have headlines.
It's 2 o'clock.
Nigeria Info, your number one for news. Always spot on, fresh and direct on 99.3 Nigeria Info. The headline news on 99.3 Nigeria Info.
The House of Reps passes Electoral Act Amendment Bill without minority caucus. Minority Leader Ndudu Elumelu staged a walkout after Deputy Speaker of the House, Ahmed Wase, refused to revisit Clause 52 of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. House of Reps former Speaker Aminu Tambuwal criticizes Senate's decision to subject INEC's constitutional powers to Nigerian Communications Commission and National Assembly. PDP expresses shock at Senate's rejection of electronic transmission of election results, while House of Reps passes Petroleum Industry Bill, approves 3% for host communities without minority caucus. National Broadcasting Commission orders television, radio stations in Nigeria not to report details of terrorist attacks or name victims. National Broadcasting Commission also calls on media practitioners to be more cautious in reporting crisis situations in the country. National Economic Council rules out lockdown amid prospect of COVID-19 third wave, while Nigeria to receive over 40 million vaccines between July and September. Federal government inaugurates reconstituted Russia-Nigeria Joint Coordination Committee on National Atomic Energy. Federal government declares Tuesday and Wednesday next week as public holidays to mark this year's Eid al-Kabir celebration. Police kill notorious bandit Abdullahi Umi in gun battle. Nigerian Army says a former Provost Marshal Major General Hassan Ahmed has been assassinated. And Amnesty International urges Ethiopia to release or charge detained ethnic Tigrayans. Those were the headlines. It is back to the downfall conversation with Ireti Bakare-Yusuf right here at 99.3 Nigeria Info. I'm Yvonne Okaifo.
listening to your number one station for talk, 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.
Welcome back to Down.
If you're watching on YouTube, I want what Yvonne is wearing. It's so unfair. She looks absolutely fabulous. Fabulous. Right. Representing Africa. Me, I tried to represent Africa in my jacket. I don't even understand. The rain messed up my look. I had to put this scarf on. Anyway, we're back. Right. Panashe, you wanted to, you were going to respond, or you had something to say before we went on the news? Very quickly. The lines are going crazy. Let me remind you of the number 0700 993 993 993. Female only. Why have we only had one woman calling, or is it two? What's wrong with you girls? Come on. 014 190 and WhatsApp is 0809 597 5805. Panashe, go ahead. We've got 30 minutes left, so I have to start cutting everybody's time now. So go ahead. You got 1 minute. Why can't we hear her? Why can't we hear Panashe? Yes, now we can hear you. Right.
I wanted to just give a little bit of a sense of why I tend to have that longer historical view and why I speak a little bit less about the likes of Ramaphosa or Jacob Zuma. It comes from the experience that I have in Zimbabwe, the experience that we have there, where so much of our politics for the last, let's say, 2 decades at least, have been about Mugabe must go, ZANU-PF must go. And what that means very often then is that we articulate very readily what we don't want, but we don't also give the space to articulate what we actually do want, what kind of society we do envision. And therefore, when there is a vacuum, as we saw in Zimbabwe, it becomes very easy for someone to come in who in the end we realized was actually worse, but we took them on because all they had to do was co-opt our anti-Mugabe politics and dress it up in their own garb. I think that's really important within South Africa because, again, as I say, for many years, people thought if we just get rid of Zuma, the ANC will be fine. Everything will be much better under Ramaphosa. And yet we're seeing this kind of crisis unfolding. And as Eusebius has said, it's not necessarily going to be better if we have another ANC leader. And so this kind of understanding of what kind of society do we actually want, what kind of political imagination and what kind of narratives in terms of what we want for our society. We don't spend nearly enough time as Africans and as Black people globally articulating what kind of society do we actually want for ourselves. And that's why we have to speak about issues around violence, for example, because those are the kinds of things that get left by the wayside when we only focus, let's say, on the economics.
Excellent. Thank you. So what do we want? Let's go to the next call. Hello? Oh, you got disconnected. I'm so sorry. Right. So, oops. So sorry. Call back. You know, it's raining today. You know what it's like in Nigeria when it rains. Right. I have a message here from, can't see his name. Oh, Yakubu Emmanuel from Ikeja. He says, I love South Africa. Ching, ching. There you go. Now, he said, what I have to say is that generally all African countries are facing the same problems or more. But what I have to say generally is do not judge others' conditions when you have a big or bigger problems facing you and bringing you down. And lastly, what is the solution to this South Africa's current uprising? Eusebius, what do you think is the solution? We're coming closer to the end of the show.
We need to galvanize around a common vision of what we want. Panashe frames that in terms of, in part, a longer identitarian question about who we imagine ourselves to be. That is spot on. We also need immediate and medium-term goals so that we know what it is that we are aiming at collectively. And we don't have that in South Africa currently. We don't have a big 10, 15, 20-year project articulated by the leadership. And the first step towards a solution is for the leadership vacuum to be filled and for a leadership to help us to have a national conversation about what it is that we want. Thereafter, we can craft a plan and then get our hands dirty.
Thank you. Let's answer the next call. Hello? Hello?
Hello, Sister.
Yes, good afternoon. Who's on the line, please?
Good afternoon. My name is David from Ibeshi Island.
Hello, David. Go ahead with your comment or question, please.
Yes, your guests have really contributed that trying to find where our problem is coming from as an Africa, from these our colonial masters. And I think the solution we have at hand now is that we must find a way of going to UN where all of us are connected together so that there will be an agreement there that any country that is faulted in its discharge as government to take care of the people, then the UN can come in and make sure they try to correct what is wrong. Because it seems that's the problem we have now. The oligarchy men, as we have them all around Africa, uses the gun to make sure the majority of the people don't have a say, even when they are doing the wrong thing. So we have to seek for a UN charter that will keep up this suffering, what do they call it? And if somebody is not doing well and the people are suffering, why will you say because they are a suffering country, then nobody can come in the globe to come and correct what is going wrong there?
Thank you so much. Thank you, David. Right, Panashe, I'm going to come to you for that. So David is saying we need to have an agreement with the UN. So when an African leader is letting us down, we say, UN, please come in and step in. I hear something of a generational difference. Perhaps I'm wrong. Do say.
Right. I would say first, Eusebius, I totally agree with you. I would just say it is beyond an identitarian call. It is to say materially, it is also materialist and structural change that I'm interested in saying. How do we fundamentally reorganize the way in which our society works? And again, I don't believe, although I'm speaking about South Africa, I don't believe that any Black people across the world are going to be free as long as all of us are not free. I.e., this is a problem beyond the nation state. Many of the problems that we do face as Africans, and I don't, when I speak about Africans, I don't just mean Africans on the continent. I'm also talking about the historic diaspora. For example, we have Jamaicans who are calling for reparations right now from Britain. Their problems are our problems too. And for example, when they came to Durban and these Caribbean nations called for reparations, African states didn't support them. Just to add that to part of our global imagination of us as Black people. For me, I am not pro-UN intervention in African governance in that way. I think, the governance needs to be legitimate from our own power sources. We should be able to have our own governance structures because we know that these institutions are not impartial. We know that there's global political economy. So I do not trust the UN to be intervening on our behalf as Africans. Not to say that I necessarily believe in the African Union either. So we have a serious problem in terms of international governance structures because we know that there is a difference in the ways in which these things happen, for example. So I don't think that the solution is the UN, for example. There is, and again, it's not just a restructuring of South Africa, it is a restructuring of the world. Again, this is why I speak about a fundamental reimagination. It's difficult beyond the short-term answers in terms of saying, we should get a basic income grant, for example. We can think about redistributing economic resources, those kinds of things. I find it very difficult. For example, in South Africa, you have two of the country's richest men, Johan Rupert and Christo Visa, or was it Wouter Basson? Not Wouter Basson, Whitey Basson, own half of the country's wealth. In this cross-class solidarity, are they going to give up that wealth? Even globally, we're talking about global apartheid, global vaccine apartheid. While we're struggling to get basic vaccines, people are going to the moon. It's that kind of structural apartheid that's not just at the nation state level, it's a global level. It's happening everywhere. So we have to have that kind of, this is why we find that in my generation, again, you speak about things like socialism, you speak about communism, socialism in particular, democratic socialism. That is something that's no longer a bogeyman for many of us, because we're seeing that capitalism, neoliberal forms of democracy are not working anywhere in the world. It's not unique to the African continent.
You've triggered the phone lines. Right. Hello? Hello? Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
You had Sociable on the line.
Okay. What's your name again, please?
Sociable.
Sociable. Go ahead.
Yeah. It surprises me because it seems that we are not telling ourselves the truth. So.
What's the truth we're not saying?
Some young men are destroying things in South Africa, putting fire in factories and in businesses. And they say they are looking for a job. Where do they want to get the job?
Okay.
After burning all those things.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay,
go on.
We are here blaming the government.
Okay. Thank
you.
You
see the point. Where are we going to get the job for them?
Thank you. Have you been listening to the show from the beginning?
I have been listening.
Right. Okay.
I have been listening.
Okay. So you think the fact, unfortunately, we got disconnected. Eusebius, do you want to give us a 30-second response to that, to Sociable? I can't hear Eusebius. I don't know what's going on with the lines today. Hello?
Let's see. Can you hear
me? There you
now?
go. Yes.
I'll give you a 20-second response. He listened, but he fails the comprehension test. If 74% of young people are unemployed, and it means that the factories that you are seeing being burned down right now are not exactly places that are absorbing the unemployed masses into the labor market. Does it justify criminality? Absolutely not. But you will never solve a crisis in a society by finger wagging and by moralizing. You've got to ask the question, why do people break the law? And you ask that question because you want to arrive at a solution. There's a difference between excusing a problem and trying to understand it.
Exactly. So you look for a solution, not just an immediate, but a long-lasting solution that can be trusted. Let's answer the next call, please. Hello? Okay. Right. So we're almost at the end of the show. I know you're still going to call. My producer has already given me that eye that she normally gives me, but I think, how long have I got left? I've still got like 10 minutes. Oh, okay. Yes. Okay. We're doing good. Right. So which means I can bring you in, Panashe, and say to you, I know I've asked this before, but I want to ask it again. Or should I say, before you go, since we've got the opportunity and the lines are going again, what are the 2 or 3 things that, and I want this directed not just at South Africans, but as Nigerians, everybody heard about NSAS. We all have the same problem. I mean, I look in the mirror and sometimes I don't see Nigeria. I see every other country in Africa. That's what I see in me, in all the lines, in all the pains that I have, in my tears. It's buried with all of their pain. What are the 2 or 3 things that you would like to leave us with before we get to the end of the show, since we've got the time, before I start taking other calls?
Right. Again, I'm interested in our political imaginations. And I say this because very often our conceptions of freedom is to say that we want to live in the ways that, let's say, our oppressors lived, for example. So the idea being that if we have more Black billionaires, more Black millionaires, and that kind of thing, those are our symbols of success. As opposed to saying, well, what if we have a society where more of us don't have to go hungry, where more of us can have access to an education, where more of us can have access to jobs and meaningful employment. And that's not necessarily something that we've been doing in South Africa or across much of the African continent. Very often, part of what we thought independence was assuming the very same positions and not fundamentally restructuring the colonial apparatus that we had. So, for example, I'll speak about land reform in Zimbabwe. When we did that land redistribution, a large part of the problem, aside from sort of the means in which it happened, is that there wasn't a restructuring of the agrarian economy in Zimbabwe. So what we had is that many Black farmers became the old farmers of the past. So i.e., you can still have a situation where you have large-scale farmers and have food insecurity at an aggregate, right? So at the aggregate level, you can have food, but you don't have food security for the majority of the population. As a saying, how do we break up these farms? We don't want to see mega farming corporations. We want to see more people having access to farming, for example. And that's what I mean about a political imagination. It's not just replicating what we've seen in the past to say, how do we fundamentally have a different kind of society? So we're saying in South Africa, for example, and even across the world, is it moral to have billionaires? Does it make sense to have people who have so much to eat while people are going to bed hungry? And those are the kinds of things that in South Africa we've normalized. You will see people who have 2 trolleys, for example, at shopping malls or shopping centers like Woolworths and that kind of thing. Housewives at 1 p.m. and a builder behind her who has a loaf of bread and Coke. That's the society we live in. Like, this is like little Europe, and this is fantastic, but you're pasteurized that kind of vibe, and we think that society's all right as long as some black people can get over them.
Yes, he's been normalized. I think he's been normalized. And I see same taxis walk down the road as the exact same image. Now that political imagination or reimagination that okay, my producer is already pulling strange fingers at me, telling me where I should. That political reimagination that Panashe talks about, I want what I feel like what?
Look, I'm committed in simple as much quality as we are able to generate, even though through natural competition, we will invariably end up in different parts of society eventually. But we need equal opportunity to be our best individual selves. The reimagination must be around how do we create cities where everyone has got access to the necessary shouldn't do last, which your last call did. And this has been on the poor line because living under Johannesburg, born into
to both